You're listening to the TV Obsessive channel, presented by TVObscast.com.
Hello and welcome back to episode 53 of the TV Obsessive podcast. My name is Ryan Kirksey, writer and contributor for TVObsessive.com. I'm joined once again by the executive editor for the site, Cameron Crane. Cameron, I'd like you to know today is my wedding anniversary.
Oh, happy anniversary.
Spending it with you. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I don't mind. How does your wife feel about it?
Well, to be determined.
Oh, yeah.
To be determined.
It's still relatively early in the day, so I assume,
Yeah.
perhaps you'll take her to dinner later or,
Yes.
or something
We did
like that.
we did a nice brunch earlier. We'll go out later. We just put our daughter on a plane for a trip, so we'll I'm able to squeeze you in the middle of the day here. So you're welcome.
Oh, cool. Much appreciated. Recording these at our normal time here, it's June 7th, 2024. It's Friday. It's Ryan's wedding anniversary. Almost the anniversary of the TV Obsessive podcast here. So to remind everyone of what we're doing, basically over the past couple of weeks, and then this week and next week, we're kind of revisiting some television from the past year that was kind of our favorite television that we didn't really have a chance to dig into that much on the podcast. I think we can put it that way. And then a couple weeks down the line, we're going to talk about The Bear, which is season 3 is on the horizon. So in the latter part of the pod today, we're going to talk about The Curse, which is my choice for favorite show of the year that we've been recording the podcast. I guess it was in 2023. I'd probably raise it up there. Probably my favorite show of 2023 if we were even calibrating that way in terms of new series. So hopefully people have seen this show and be with us for the latter part of the pod. But first, as per usual, we'll talk a bit about what's been in the news this week regarding TV, what we've been watching and stuff like that, in a spoiler-free sort of way. So what caught your eye this week, Ryan?
Yeah, today is actually a pretty monumental day on TV for one reason. Today will air Pat Sajak's last Wheel of Fortune after 43 years of hosting this show. I can't say that I'm a habitual Wheel of Fortune watcher. I'll catch some of the clips and the reels and things like that, but
Right.
there are very few things I think that everyone in this country over 10 years of age would know what they are. And Wheel of Fortune is probably one of those things.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an institution. I recall when I was younger, I lived with my grandparents basically, and every night they would watch. Well, first they put on the evening news,
Right.
and then
Right.
after the news was Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. Every night,
Yeah.
Um,
Same with my grandparents for years and years and years. That's all.
Yeah.
That was the routine.
So I always like Jeopardy more than Wheel of Fortune. You get the appeal of the game, but it's Hangman, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It's not exactly super sophisticated, but it's interesting. I was telling you a couple of weeks ago, I watched that docuseries. I think it was called The Game Show. And so you're reminding me of some of the stuff about Wheel of Fortune in there, and how that idea arose, and how Vanna White became involved, which I believe she's staying on, right?
She has 2 more years on her contract. Yes.
Kind of amazing that we have had. I mean, you think about it, you say 43 years. I mean, this is my lifetime. I mean, I turned 44 in a couple of months personally.
Right.
And this Wheel of Fortune has been there. And I remember, do you remember when it was like they had to buy furniture or whatever?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Before there was like the Wheel of Prizes. Yeah. Yes. You had to use your money to buy things. Vanna used to have to actually, flip the tiles for the letters. I mean, I've been there as long as you have. I remember clearly these things in the old versions of the show.
They'll keep it going. Was another thing that was striking me watching that game show was I hadn't realized how long Drew Carey had been doing The Price is Right at this point. In my mind, it was still like, hey, he took that over a couple of years ago. Yeah, it's been 15 years, I think.
Yeah.
But they're going to keep Wheel of Fortune going, right? And who's taking over? Like Ryan Seacrest or something?
I have not seen exactly who's taking over. I do know Vanna is staying 2 more seasons, but I have to admit I don't know who is taking over that spot.
Maybe I made up that it should be Ryan Seacrest, or as they say on BoJack Horseman, a Ryan Seacrest type.
Yeah. It wouldn't be, I mean, statistically speaking, he is probably the most likely to take over for all of these game shows that lose their host. So
Yeah,
who
Joel
knows? But
McHale
good for
is
good
also
fortune. Yeah.
odds on.
Yeah. Good for Pat Sajak, 77 years old. Go enjoy your retirement.
What a gig, too, man.
No kidding.
You know. Now I know that Pat Sajak, I don't know if you know this, Pat Sajak wanted to be a late night host.
Oh, I did not know that.
I wonder if he'll get any opportunity. It was like watching that docuseries, they kind of talked him into it. He wanted to be Johnny Carson, right? Like
Yeah.
that was his idol, that was his goal. And they were like, well, you know what, Pat? You know what Johnny Carson got his start doing? Hosting a game show. And they like
Game shows. Yep.
got him into it. So I don't know. I don't know if he'll get any opportunity or if that's something he still
Yeah.
fantasizes about doing. But man, what a job to do if you think about hosting Wheel of Fortune, you know. Okay. Anyway,
It's a great gig. It's a
great gig.
great gig.
Good.
Kudos to him.
Yeah.
What else we got going on this week?
Well, one thing that caught my eye, and I'm actually really excited about this. Have you ever seen Creep horror film?
So yes, I remember after I saw this note here, I remember seeing this Mark Duplass vehicle. I have seen, I guess there's one or two. I think I've only seen one.
There's two films, yeah.
Okay, so I've seen one.
The second one is probably not as good. I mean, one of the things in the article that I shared with you even is Mark Duplass saying he thought Creep 2 like kind of wasn't like we had to work really hard to make it as good as it was, but he seems a little dissatisfied with it himself. So I don't think I'm talking out of school or whatever. But if people haven't seen Creep, it's really a kind of low budget indie horror film. Got Mark Duplass, Patrick Bryce, who directs and is also like the other main character. It's just kind of like a two-person story, basically, small in scale, and creepy for sure. Something that definitely stuck with me, like kind of lodged in my mind, particularly how it ends and so on. I think Creep 2 is pretty good. You know, I mean, it's kind of you get Mark Duplass again playing the same character, and then you have another character, entering the story. But anyway, there's been some discussion over the years since Creep 2 came out, which I want to say was or maybe 5 or 6, 7 years ago or something like that. There's been some discussion about making Creep 3. And I guess part of it is Mark Duplass feeling like, I don't know if we really have the stuff for it or whatever, but apparently they've made a series of kind of short films. I mean, will only be episodes of a TV show that they're shopping around. It doesn't have a home as of yet, but the Creep tapes apparently exists with Mark Duplass and Patrick Bryce involved directing. And they went and did another thing, right? They just went those Duplasses. They just went and just made another thing that they don't have distribution for yet.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Is that this is not the first Mark Duplass project that we've seen, I guess, hit the open market for lack of a better term, right? He's shopping around his various properties right now.
Yeah, we were talking about Penelope a couple weeks ago. I don't remember exactly when it was on the podcast. I want to say it was maybe 2 weeks ago. If people want to look up our discussion on Penelope, which Duplass Brothers Productions made as a series and then got to some distribution at Netflix and so on. I feel relatively confident that the Creep tapes will find distribution. I mean, this is an established franchise. There's really a fan base here. I'm pretty excited for it.
Horror is one of those things, and this is traditionally in a movie sense, but horror is one of those things that always has a decent return on investment. You can always find a place for it. You can always find an audience for it. You can always find people that want to see new versions and new stories and new things that have not been told before. So this had enough of a following that A, yes, I think it will find a place, and B, will, I think, draw a significant audience. So horror is one of those things that has a sort of built-in floor of an audience you can count on no matter what you put out.
I would think so. I'm really curious about it because it's easy enough for me to imagine or I understand what the premise is, right? That Mark Duplass's character has these tapes of other victims, as it were, and that we would see some of them in sort of shorter form. What I'm really curious about is, well, like, okay, what distinguishes one from another, and so on and so forth, and kind of gets them excited about this as a series of episodes, as a TV series.
The
So,
first thing I thought of when I saw this was, there's the Creep Show series that has been brought back to life by Greg Nicotero. Do I have that right? From Walking Dead fame. I think I have that right. But there's a sort of Creep Show anthology where it just short 2 or 3 stories within each episode. And so it's not exactly this, but there is the sense of, yes, these types of series can do well, especially when it's some kind of property that they can count on, people seen before.
right, yeah. And so each episode, you would imagine, would be a new person entering into but again, I don't know. I'm in part trying to avoid massive spoilers for Creep if people haven't seen it,
Yeah.
but it's like, how do you distinguish different iterations of what you could see being same story, different victim, So I imagine they must have some ideas about that, certainly with Room 104 in the background. I don't know. It could go a lot of ways potentially in
Yeah.
terms of when I think about what they did with that show. So hopefully someone will pick this up. It exists. Hopefully we'll get to see it in the relatively near future. But yeah, I do feel confident that someone will. I just find myself wondering, will it be like Shudder, or does this have the juice to get HBO?
Shutter sounds like a safe bet, but we'll have to see how far some of these is willing to go. But Shutter does seem like the safe bet on something like this.
Yeah, it seems likely. We have some other things here. More casting news for Dexter, which it'd probably be a step more interesting to talk about if you watch Dexter.
Yeah, I was looking at like I said, I've looked at who these folks are. These are all young versions of characters that I have no idea who they are, but some interesting names here that will be coming to the Dexter Original Sin prequel series.
Yeah, this is part of why it stood out to me is, thinking about the older versions of these characters who were established in Dexter, and then the younger versions. I mean, I guess in part just that they will be in the show. That's part of the thing that stood out to me, because it's a prequel series. It's never going to be entirely clear, but no, they want to mine the nostalgia is not the right word, but whatever, fan base to say, oh, look, it's a younger Angel Batista, so we are going to get younger versions of Angel Batista, of Maria Laguerta, and of Masuka, which I don't know, the last one surprises me the most for some reason. I don't know why. And then the new, I don't know why part of me feels like Masuka like kind of young to be in this. I don't know. Anyway, maybe that's it. Masuka doesn't necessarily strike me as someone who has been working for the Miami Police Department for like 20 years or whatever the time difference is.
I was going to say this takes place in 1991, so it's quite a jump back in time.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other one is the role of Bobby Watt, who's going to be Harry's partner. And I failed to mention the actors' names here. We have James Martinez, Christina Milian, Alex Shimizu, and Reno Wilson.
I will admit, I've been thinking more and more about trying the experiment of watching this show first and then moving on to Dexter to see what that's like. I know I'm the last person in the world who hasn't seen it, so maybe we'll try that and see what happens.
I endorse the idea. I think that could be interesting, but I'm a weirdo like this. Like, I always wanted to talk to someone who watched Better Call Saul before they watch Breaking Bad, and people don't tend to do this because they know the orders.
Yeah,
the other way around in terms of how things came out. But I'm increasingly curious about this Dexter prequel. I might have to actually give it a shot, and I don't know. I'm a little worried though that with the casting of these younger versions of these established characters, that there is going to be a lot of like winking at stuff from the original series in a way that's just more like fan service
Yeah.
or something like that. But I don't know. And maybe it'll be good. Maybe it'll be good.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the early 90s, we had talked this is several months ago about the American Gladiators documentary, I think that came on Netflix that I watched. It was wildly entertaining looking behind the scenes at that. American Gladiators has been picked up to be renewed at Prime
Yeah.
Video. I think a lot came out about how dangerous and some real sort of tough things came out of that original show. I assume they'll take some more precautions as this version comes out, but we're gonna get more, Gauntlet and all your favorite contests in American Gladiator sometime in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Which cool. But also,
Yeah,
do we want this?
yeah,
It's American Gladiators. The original series seems so in line with when it came out with its era,
yes,
it made
yes.
so much sense in that context of like the late 1980s or um whatever it was exactly. In 2024, do people want American Gladiators? Do you think this is going to be a hit?
I can't say this is on high on my list of things that I wish would be rebooted. I mean, you can just go back and watch old episodes of American Gladiators and be entertained by those. I mean, you're right. This was the era. I mean, we had a blind eye to steroids in this country. We didn't care what they were doing behind the scenes. I mean, this was indicative of early to mid 90s. Yeah, what will the 2025, let's say, version look like?
Yeah,
Probably
will
not
they
much like the original.
are they going to wear red, white, and blue spandex? And like they better, what I mean? But
Exactly.
that feels weird in a sense. And then what was the appeal of American Gladiators? I mean, I think part of it was then like relatively ordinary people competing against um I don't know. We'll see. It's
Yeah,
intriguing that they're
yeah.
rebooting it.
I, they must have some indication that this is that there's an audience for this because it's coming and there's searching the country high and low for gladiators. So
Yeah.
apply if you wish.
I mean, their indication is probably just like that documentary did well. No, let's reboot.
Yes. Oh, it did. Yeah.
Let's reboot the series.
Yeah,
Okay.
the documentary was not meant to glamorize the show necessarily. It was meant to show
Right.
that, wow, it's surprising that some of these people are still alive. That was the point of the documentary.
Yeah. More of a dark side of the ring kind of.
Yep,
Um,
exactly.
Briefly mentioned the Terminator animated series that's coming out a couple of weeks ago. This is when we had all those announcements for the upfronts and so on and so forth. So we didn't really talk about this. So I thought, well, we can take the opportunity to talk about it a little bit here. It's come out that Timothy Oliphant, our friend, is voicing the Terminator. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, are we going to get justified Timothy Oliphant as Terminator? I'm excited to see which version of Timothy Oliphant we get. I mean, we're going to get some kind of, whether it's Cobb Vanth on Mandalorian or Justified, Timothy Oliphant. We're going to get some version of the Terminator we've never seen before.
Yeah. I mean, and this whole series seems kind of distinctive in the Terminator universe and kind of interesting in terms of what they're doing with it. I don't know for sure if I'll watch it. This is Netflix animated series.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if it'll be widely watched. They've been doing a decent amount of this kind of stuff on Netflix, and
Yes.
it seems clear there must be a fan base like the Castlevania
Yes.
shows and things like that. But I do think this one's interesting as broadly speaking a Terminator fan. But see, I haven't even seen everything. Like I haven't seen the most recent films that people say are bad. I just haven't
Yeah.
seen them because they kind of look bad.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't remember. I think I saw the third one. I don't know
I
how many
did. I
there
did
are.
too with the woman in the tight red outfit. That's the last one I saw. I don't know who that was, but that's the last one I've seen.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what I have and haven't seen myself. So, but I guess this does fit in a distinctive sort of way. And I think they're going to be fighting with swords. I don't know. It's kind of intriguing, sort of Terminator as anime, I think a little bit. But anyway, Tim
Yes.
the Oliphant's going to be um, there as a voice actor. I am a fan of Timothy Olyphant, so I thought I'd
So
mention that.
let me just ask you, if you're Timothy Olyphant, why are you doing this? For a check? I mean, you got a lot a lot of irons in the fire, and you're tied up with two or three pretty substantial properties and things that still have things coming out. So, why is Timothy Olyphant agreeing to do this?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just for a paycheck. Maybe he's a Terminator
Yeah,
fan,
maybe. Yeah, maybe so.
you know.
Don't know.
But you never know. Again, maybe he's just offered the gig and he's okay. I don't know about his chops as a voice actor. I mean, this is a real aside, but there is kind of a issue that people worry about, and I worry about a little bit on the margins of this tendency to get well-known celebrities to voice for animation as opposed to
Yeah,
voice actors, you know?
right. Yeah.
And I don't know. Maybe I don't have a ton to say about that, but in principle, I do share the concern that I've seen expressed by people in the voice acting community and so on that like, why don't you hire professional voice actors who exist instead of
Exactly.
someone who maybe isn't trained as a voice actor but is a well-known celebrity, and so you hire that person instead. So, but I don't know. I don't even know anything about Timothy Olyphant's background with that sort of thing, and I don't know. Maybe I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, but
We have a couple of things here, just stars with other new projects coming up. Let me start with a short one, and then we'll get into one that's really they caught my attention
yeah,
here at the end. Sarah Snook was probably the last of the major stars in succession to come out and say what their next thing is going to be. Sarah Snook, who played Shiv Roy on Succession, is going to star and produce in a very popular crime book called All Her Faults on Peacock. I read the little logline description of this. Sounds
uh,
interesting. I think she's a tremendous actress, so I think it's something I certainly will the combination of her plus this story. I think I'll check this out.
yeah. I mean, it looks like it looks fairly compelling.
Yeah,
It's a thriller, kind of crime thriller. To me, it's a part of the question is with that genre, is that something that you're into? Is that something that you're looking for?
yeah.
But as far as that goes, yeah, it looks like a compelling story, and I appreciate Sarah Snook. When I did try to watch Succession, she was my favorite part.
Yeah, she's been tremendous, and I think I've heard many people say that same sentiment that they're all of the characters on that show are just horrific, but in terms of the if you can feel sympathy or empathy or connection in any of them, Sarah and sort of the way that she is often stomped upon in that show is the one that people really were drawn to. So she did a great job. I'm glad she's got a new thing coming up.
Cool. Yeah. So we're looking forward to that. We have two more things. Which one do you want to do first?
Let's another new project from a I would not have expected anything to come from this person for a long time is Alec and Hilaria Baldwin
Yeah.
reality series
Yeah.
that's coming to TLC. This is announced just 1 month before he goes on trial for his gun charges, unlawfully discharging a gun on the set of Rust. If you haven't kept up with this story, there's a chance that Alec Baldwin could go to prison for up to 18 months for the various charges he's up against with this. But he and his family have announced that the nine of them, he and his wife and seven kids, are going to have a reality show on TLC. I don't think he's been getting many offers. So I wonder if this is sort of
Yeah.
we need to go find someone to tell a story to, someone who will put us on screen somewhere.
Yeah. I still think it's odd because, as you say, I mean, he's not off the hook with regard to that Rust shooting.
Yep.
Um, I think he's charged with involuntary manslaughter. I think that's right. I'm not a lawyer anyway,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
from what I know about that case, I mean, it does seem like there's a decent chance that he'll get acquitted, or I don't know. I don't particularly think he is going to go to prison. If you
Yeah.
raise that
That's
possibility,
that's the prevailing sentiment. Yeah.
still feels odd. Like the idea of this series, if you totally took away the fact that that shooting happened, okay, I could see it, because I used to,
There are plenty of those. Yeah.
yeah, I used to watch, Match Game hosted by Alec Baldwin. He's always making jokes about how he's had too many kids, So, there is that background here, and I can kind of see it's a TLC show. It does feel like something that it almost feels to me like something that should have been on 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I guess you could still do something like that. Now, everything about it feels like it works, and I might be still a little bit surprised in the past because I would have thought Alec Baldwin was too big of a named actor for it or something. So
Yeah.
it's weird in two ways, right? It's weird for on the one hand because you feel like, no, Alec Baldwin should be, in serious films or something. And then on the other hand, it's because, well, he's got this legal trouble.
Yeah.
He actually fired a gun on set that killed people, and it's a really bizarre thing.
It just screams to me, I need work. That's what it's, or I have legal fees. That's what it's telling me.
I guess it just seems to me like the appropriate kind of PR move would be to get past all of that and then do this later in a way where you could act like, yeah, we're moving past that, we're going to forget about it or whatever, particularly because it's a reality show
Yeah, exactly.
and this thing is happening in his actual life. I don't know. It does make me curious how they're going to deal with that in the show. Are they just going to ignore it entirely? My guess is probably yes. So I don't know. It's kind of an odd thing.
It comes out in 2025, as stated here in this announcement. Probably the trial, the sentence, anything that revolve around that is done, and they can just move on from the rest of his life, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's the plan. Other things pertaining to the law came out this past week that they settled the case between Linda Fairstein and Netflix. This stems from When They See Us, which I wrote about for the site actually when it came out. It was like 5 years ago. Did you ever watch it, When They See Us?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I completely forgotten about this and this story that was told like this about the Central Park Five. I believe this, I watched this right when it came out. I'll need to revisit it. And I also admittedly did not even realize there was a long-standing, ongoing legal battle from the district attorney about this.
It's weird. I mean, I knew it totally faded into the background. It wasn't something that I was keeping up on, or whatever. And I also had kind of forgotten that she sued for defamation or whatever because of how she's portrayed
Right.
in the series. And I don't know, am I again layman's brain, not a lawyer, but in terms of how the extent to which I understand such things, I never really thought she had much of a chance. I mean, it's a fictional portrayal. What I thought was really kind of odd about this settlement, which that's the headline, is that they settled, but she didn't get any money.
Yeah, she gets really.
Netflix is going to give money to the Innocence Project, which is okay, cool.
And they're going to put a disclaimer in front of the documentary for those that have discovered it 5 years later and watch it.
Which was already in the end credits.
Right, exactly.
Like they're going to take the disclaimer that was already in the end credits. And this is one of those, to my understanding from when I read about it, this is one of those like kind of boilerplate disclaimers, like, although this is based on true events, we've taken some liberties or whatever, and I, so it kind of seems like when it came down to it, she didn't want to go to court. That was what was on the horizon. They were on the horizon of actually going to court, right? And they dropped it. So kind of interesting, I mean, people aren't aware, she did play a significant role in the conviction of the Central Park Five, as they're known. People call me Exonerated Five now often, because they didn't do it, right?
And, this looked to me like Netflix was saying, let's go to court over this. I mean, we do this all the time, and we disclaim that we have fictionalized some sort of story that was actually true in the past, but we have put different names, different circumstances, different events around it. So they were ready to go to court, and now they get all this good PR of oh, we've donated $1 million to the Innocence Project. We didn't, have to settle with this lady, and our product is still out there. So yeah, I don't see how she quote unquote wins in this situation.
I don't know, but I guess she's happy. Like I read her statement, she was like, "Oh yeah, the important thing was to set the record straight," And it's like, well, I don't know, man. I don't what in terms of what actually happened, but she was one of the people involved in, the conviction of the Central Park Five. So I don't know. Anyway, that risks some kind of tangent or whatever. She feels like the show makes her out to be this evil, racist villain or whatever. And I'm not entirely sure that's true either. Like I watched the series and it's like, yeah, she's portrayed as a central figure in the prosecution and so on and so forth. But how do you feel about any of the people who are involved with that? How do you feel about the cops who were coercing confessions and all of that? It's a complicated thing. Anyhow, watch When They See Us. People haven't watched When They See Us. I did think it was really good, and yeah, there's an article I wrote on the site from when it came out.
Great. What about what we're watching now? You seem to be watching something I wasn't sure you were still watching these days.
Well, I just had to catch up on the Doctor Who. Yeah.
Okay. And
so, yeah, the backstory there is, I watched the specials that they put out last fall, the winter, whatever the timeline was. I want to say Christmas special, but the first one was before that, and so on.
Yeah.
So people already know what I'm talking about. We've got the new Doctor, we've got the new companion, we've got Russell T Davies back as a showrunner. I've been intrigued by that from the get-go. I wasn't on top of watching the new season right when it came out, which I think was May 10th.
Yeah.
I had to sign back up for Disney Plus so that I can watch it because it's on Disney Plus now for some reason.
Yeah.
And they're also doing really confusing stuff where they're calling this season 1 now, and like the first episode is S1E0. I'm like, what are you doing? This is so confusing. Anyhow, I started watching it and I think it's quite good. And in particular, the one episode called The Devil's Cord, which features Jinx Monsoon as the villain, is great. Chewing the scenery, that one I think is a lot of fun. And in general, I've just felt like it's good. Some episodes I think are better than others. There's one with space babies that maybe like a B-. I don't know. But then some of the other ones I think are definitely like A-level quality, and it's you can feel the Russell T Davies-ness in the background, but it also feels different than its initial run. So I've been enjoying it. What about you? What have you been watching?
Yeah. How about another Disney Plus show that debuted this week? The Acolyte, the next in a long line of Star Wars shows to debut on Disney Plus. We have a good piece up. It's kind of a review of the series up on the site right now.
Yeah, Mike Crowley.
I'll echo a couple things that are said in there. Just for those that are unfamiliar, this is a Star Wars story that takes place more than 100 years before the movie The Phantom Menace. So in a time that no other Star Wars story has ever been told before. So that being said, we are not familiar with the characters. We're certainly not familiar with the story because there's not been a lot on screen about this. There have been a few books about this High Republic era. We're not familiar with that era. We're not familiar with these characters. So I think in setting up a show like this, you have to get us invested in one of those two things, either the characters or the story, like make those things compelling. And I'd say through the 2-episode debut that came out this past Tuesday, I don't think they're quite there on either one of those things yet. I think there are some interesting directions the characters can go. I think there is an interesting sort of murder mystery, what happened in the past that's setting up the present story that could be told. They kind of tried to do a little bit of both in the 2-episode premiere. And so I'm hoping they can build on some of those things. Right now, it's good, and I think could be great if they spend some time on those, developing those things out. But if they just make it, because we're back to lightsabers and force and stuff that haven't been in some of the previous shows. If they just focus on that stuff and just, we want the kids Star Wars stuff, I think it's going to do a disservice, but it could be a good show.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, kind of echoing, I think, some of the things that Mike said. And it seems like he watches. Maybe you're in a similar camp. It seems like Mike Crowley, who wrote the review of the Acolyte for the site. It seems like he watches all the Star Wars stuff, and every time he writes something, he always thinks like, "Well, I've kind of seen this before," and
Yeah,
man, it's like, but you keep watching it anyway, and some of these thoughts about the potential. So I don't know. Hopefully, they actually do kind of live up to that potential with this one. We'll have to check in down the line and see what your thoughts are when it wraps up.
Yeah,
You
I'd be
know,
interested to think back on it. Another 6 episodes or so will come out, so hopefully they do some good things with it. The Also want to circle back to something we touched on last Friday, which is I mentioned that I was going to binge the show Eric, Benedict Cumberbatch, Netflix,
yeah,
about a missing boy in 1980s New York and a puppet. This guy, Benedict Cumberbatch is sort of you'd say sort of deranged Jim Henson type who creates puppets for a kids TV show. There are some very deranged things in this series. I did watch it. I would recommend it. I would say the best thing that it does is create the aesthetic of sort of gritty, dirty 1980s New York. I mean, makes you feel like you are in that town at that time.
well,
The show is going a lot of different directions and has some real odd things in it, as you can tell, with you're talking about a missing child and how they're going to try to find him using a puppet that he creates. But is a good story, but really in terms of the aesthetic, in terms of the cinematography, they do a really great job there. And Cumberbatch's performance is fantastic. Just some questionable storytelling stuff, but all in all, I think it's a good, quick 6 episode binge. Good show to watch.
right on. Yeah, I may have to check that one out. It does look intriguing.
Yeah.
I'll mention just briefly, Phantasmus comes out tonight. I watch Phantasmus tonight, 11 p.m. on
Okay.
HBO.
That's right.
Read my article on episode 1 of Phantasmus. Just thought of that.
Yeah. Let me also, before we close out this section, use this to plug next week. Obviously, I think most people are probably aware House of the Dragon comes out on June 16th.
Yeah.
I'll be covering that, having something out the next day. Next week on the site, we'll have a preview / look ahead from season 1 going into season 2. So we can look for that at some point ahead of the June 16th premiere of season 2.
Cool, great. Yeah, got that on the horizon. We got the Bear on the horizon. Phantasmas, which is it's
same
my favorite
category.
show. I've always just kind of weird. We're gonna get into the thick of it, right? Because Phantasma airs week to week. We're getting into the thick of it where everyone's watching. Everyone wants to talk about House of Dragon. Like, did you see the new Phantasmas? So let's say do another show that was kind of like that. This would be The Curse, which came out last year. It came out in November, right? So yeah, November to January. That sounds right. Nathan Fielder and Benny Safdie, starring Nathan Fielder and Emma Stone and Benny Safdie and numerous others. Hopefully, you will have watched the show. If you haven't, I definitely do recommend it, particularly if you're at all a fan of Fielder's other work like Dancing for You or The Rehearsal. This is a fictional series, more so than The Rehearsal, which is, I don't know what The Rehearsal is. Really interesting show. Okay, so this is my choice for my favorite thing that's been on TV that we haven't talked about previously on the podcast in the past year. We'll pop in about 10 seconds of music. On the other side, we're going to talk about The Curse, all of season 1, spoilers on the table. And see you in about 10 seconds.
Okay, we are back to talk about The Curse, which aired November 2023 to January 2024 on Showtime, as Karen mentioned, written and created by Nathan Fielder and Benny Safdie. Just a quick recap of the entire season. Whitney and Asher Siegel are an entrepreneurial, eco-conscious couple trying to bring their vision of new forms of green housing to the town of Espanola, New Mexico, and at the same time to the screen on HGTV. Their friend Dougie, as a producer of this proposed show, tries to use their work and the messiness of their marriage to make something that HGTV viewers will want to see. Along the way, a young girl curses Asher for not giving her a few dollars, which causes him, his marriage, the show, and the vision of what they want to do to begin to spiral downwards in some very interesting ways. Sometimes this is from actual circumstances. Sometimes maybe just it's all in Asher's mind and it's in his behavior and his psychology. In the future, at the end of the season, after Whitney gets pregnant and her relationship with Asher improves, the show Green Queen is renewed for a second season. Asher gives a renter, Abshir, who was the father of the girl who cursed him, the deed to a property outright. And the show ends with Asher beginning to strangely float as gravity seemingly was reversed on him. He's seeking help from family and friends, but his wife goes into labor. Dougie sees a great moment for TV. The fire department tries to help him, and Asher is shot into space at the same time Whitney gives birth to their new baby boy. If you've not seen this and you're hearing that and it sounds a little out there, then you're not alone.
If you're listening for some reason and you listened to all of that and you thought, "What? This show sounds weird. What?" Let me assure you, it's stranger than it sounds.
Yeah.
It's overall, that is
Yes,
Ryan just gave a pretty
was
straightforward summary, and the show's actually kind of weirder.
That was the conservative recap of this show, I think. There's much more that we'll try to dig into here. So where do you want to start?
Lots of stuff. I don't know. I mean, they talk about the show overall. Maybe I want to start with, I wrote on this show as it aired, and I put out the weekly recaps. And one of the things I kept feeling like I didn't find enough space for, and maybe it also has to do with my own limitations to express my thoughts about, is the visual style, the way it's directed, and the music, just like the feel of the show, because it's very distinctive. And it's one of those things that makes me wish that I had a bit more of a toolkit in terms of talking about cinematography and things like that.
Yes, that's a great point because this show, throughout its 10 episodes, had so much that was discussed in terms of plot, in terms of what's next, in terms of the uniqueness and strangeness of it, that some of the technical aspects of the show, I think, were lost on how how great it was, right? Sort of a show about a show being made, first of all, and then just the way that it was shot, some of the unique music, some of the unique ways of focusing on this, not only the architecture but the background and the aesthetic that they were in New Mexico. They did a fantastic job, and some of that was lost just because it was of the conversation of what was happening within the show.
There was just too much to talk about, right? And at least that's what I found when I was writing my recaps. I didn't where do I fit in the thoughts about this sort of thing? And then also, how do I express them? Again, I don't know that I always feel like I have the language, but I know they did certain things, like some of the shots are from very far away. You think about, like, why is it that the curse doesn't look or feel like anything else on TV? And that's part of it. They're breaking the normal rules in terms of where they've set up the camera, the kinds of shots that they're using. There's a kind of dirtiness to it. And I don't know, I should have rewatched. There was a YouTube video that I watched where this guy was talking about all of the stuff in a much better way than I'm equipped to do. Maybe I could find it. Put link to that video in our YouTube description or whatever, or on the podcast summary we put up on the website, that sort of thing, because it was really interesting and I thought he did a really good job. But then they switch it when they go to the HGTV show, and those segments actually change the aspect ratio. It looks just like something on HGTV, and I think it really makes it stand out how the rest of the show doesn't. And on the one hand, it feels kind of very realistic, but on the other hand, it's breaking the rules of what would be quote unquote realism in film. It was very interesting.
Yeah, and I
Altogether.
think that when you compare it to some of those things where they show real HGTV, or HGTV quality footage within this program, you almost feel like the rest of it, there's a little something off, or a little something needs to be tweaked, or something that just feels like, we need some adjustment here. And I think there was sort of a point there that they were trying to make with this sort of the message of what they were trying to deliver with the show, that, yeah, there's something a little bit, there's something not quite right with this whole thing, right? Their show, their marriage, their life, and it's reflecting the fact that the way that this is shot looks like there needs to be some things fixed compared to what we normally see on a station like HGTV. There was also the idea that many of these shots, I think, or I saw described as sort of voyeuristic, right? You're looking at them through a window, through a door, and it was that meant to reflect sort of how Dougie was kind of taking advantage of looking at their life and making a show sort of created on the problems that they had and some of the things that he saw. So just the combination of those things, and just, outside of plot, was just fascinating to see. Like you said, it's things not seen before.
Yeah, and the music's quite good. Also, is like the sound design.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I kept thinking about as I watched it at various points is how the show creates a sense of unease in various moments, and it's actually doing it through that, you know, in terms of what's going on in the plot in a specific moment. Maybe there isn't really anything there, but the way that they frame Nathan Fielder's face and the way that a certain, kind of ominous music comes in, you go, oh, it's kind of is making me uncomfortable. Um, and I think that was one of the things that I really did enjoy about the show, as perverse as this sounds, throughout, as it sort of makes you very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it challenges us, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of this show that I would say challenges us. Some of that might, get into some of the socio-political things that it talks about. There's plenty of that in terms of gentrification, white privilege, indigenous rights, a lot of different things that this show tries to tackle. Any of those things stand out for you directly?
Yeah, I mean, we should talk about it. I don't know that there's a message, as it were, what is going on, with the Seagulls, right? Asher and Whitney. They've got these I should have made a note of what they call them, because I'm blanking now. I guess I thought I would just remember. The homes. There's a real
Yeah,
thing. Passive homes. Passive homes.
passive homes. Yep,
It's a
yep.
real thing, right? So being who I am, I look at that and go, well, yeah, that seems like, that's a good idea, eco-friendly, sustainability, all that kind of thing, right? Um, but they are also purposefully attempting to gentrify Espanol. I mean, they basically say as much.
Yeah.
What do we think about that? They have this line about, though, oh, but we're not going to displace the residents. We're going to subsidize their ability to live in these new passive homes.
And placate them by giving them these temporary jobs at these, places that we're helping build up, or because of the gentrification. Yeah.
But it seems like that is temporary, and they never explicitly spell it out. They come pretty close at one point. It seems like, okay, but the long-term plan is that kind of thoroughgoing, gentrification, which I know using that term immediately brings negative connotations to a lot of people, um, which is fair. But at the same time, there is an implication of, it's like, well, you're like actually making things better in certain ways, Um, but the displacing of the population that was already there is often the big thing, the big kind of negative, right,
Yeah.
to gentrification. And so how serious are they about not doing that? I think it slips out at certain moments that in the long run, not so much. In the long run, the idea is to totally kind of revamp this town and raise all the property values, right? The big profits come kind of down the line in terms of the real estate aspect of this. And the HGTV show is like a part of that business plan on the PR side. And I don't know, there's just a lot of ways in which, with the whole setup, I was never quite sure how to feel about it, because
Yeah.
it wasn't straightforward. I don't know. What about you?
Because it always seemed to try to partner what they were doing with these um very they wanted to almost portray them as very altruistic, doing the right thing. These passive homes have net zero or net negative energy. Always saying that, okay, the things that they're trying to do have good intentions and perhaps even good outcomes, but the method by which that they pursue them, then it gets ugly if you look underneath it a little bit.
Well, and it's
And no, I'm
sorry.
just saying,
Finish.
and that just that there was never this was never sort of a black and white. I'm not talking about original. There's never a black and white, right and wrong thing here. This was you can't have a good outcome. At least in my mind, it's one of the points of the show is you can't have a good outcome, a positive thing happen without some turmoil happening underneath it, or maybe pushed away from it, and you're trying to get away from it, and it's always going to be there.
Yeah. And I mean, the way that I never quite figured out how to put this, but Asher and Whitney they're out of touch in some way. They don't get it
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
meaningful way. I don't know exactly how we pin that down with a term or something, but think about, for example, so they have got the jeans shop, right? And there's a shoplifting problem,
Mhm.
right? And the guy, whose name I should have made more notes of people's names. Anyway, the one guy that's there at the beginning who's from Espanola,
Mhm.
he's showing up with a gun, like he wants to keep people from shoplifting. And Whitley's like, no, you can't do that. It's like a victimless crime. And this is an example to me of something where part of me is like very much in sympathy with the position she's taking. Like part of me wants to say, she's right, she
Yeah,
shouldn't be um approaching shoplifting with violence, and the motivation to keep the police out of it, and you don't want to ruin someone's life because they shoplifted or whatever. But these people aren't shoplifting groceries, they're shoplifting designer jeans.
yeah,
If that's one thing. And then the other thing is she ends up just saying, like, to the working at the store, oh, well, just like bring it up on my credit card
yeah.
whenever anyone steals something. And word gets out. And there's like the way that spirals out, where it's like almost like I want to say she has good intentions, or at a certain theoretical level is kind of right, but then in practice it's a disaster.
Yeah, yeah. There will always this show seemed to always have this sense of setting up Whitney and Asher as we know best, and that we was always defined in several different ways. Like we could have been us as the white people coming into this town, we as in rich privileged people, we as in our causes, our methods, the things that we think should be done here. And just the danger of, and maybe even the curse of coming into a place, coming in anywhere and saying, my way is right. What we should do is the path that you all should take, without taking into account anything in terms of history, the area, its population. We'll talk about some of the indigenous culture things here shortly, but taking none of that into account, just saying we have an idea, we know best, we need to pursue it. Sort of outcomes be damned in terms of what happens.
Yeah, except that they also seem weirdly self-conscious about that, like they're trying to avoid that, but they're delusional is the thing. You get the
Yeah,
structure where they're just kind of detached from reality, and suffering from their own delusions. And how do you even parse the truth there, right? Like, are Asher and Whitney respecting the kind of indigenous culture of Espanola? From the outside, I kind of want to say no when it comes
yeah,
down to it. They want to say yes. They're aware of the issue, right? They're aware of worries about cultural appropriation. They're aware of worries about gentrification. They're aware of the background history of colonialism and all that. They've got this hyper awareness of all of that, and yet they're like, um, I don't know. They're almost like just at a theoretical level with it, and unable to see how that actually works out in a more concrete way. I don't know. So it's like,
Yeah.
but I think that they believe their own bullshit, and that's
Yeah.
part of what makes the show so compelling.
That is a great bottom line, right? And even to go back to your words, theoretically, they believe all these things that they come in with the knowledge, the history, the understanding of. We're going to pay attention to all of this. We're going to keep all this in mind. Then doing that, it is solved or approached or decided in a way that they still think is best, not as what's incorporating, what actually needs to be done within the community, within the population, within the people that they're affecting. It is their theoreticalness of approaching these problems in a way that they think that they should be solved.
Yeah. And so let's talk about what I put in the notes is all the stuff with Cara Durand.
Yeah.
Because I thought this was a really great part of the show. The actress name here, I'm almost certain to mangle her name, but I want to mention her name. Miss Hania Austin plays Cara Durand, an indigenous artist. Hopefully, people remember from the show. This is where Whitney goes to her art installation and eats the turkey, and Cara yells at her for eating the turkey. And I want to look at a couple of things that I've read along the way here. One of them was about that actually, when Cara ultimately like explains that bit with the turkey, like what is the meaning of this art installation?
Yeah.
From what I've read, I guess that was what she says is basically in line with what Benny Safdie and Nathan Fielder had in mind. But in this interview I read or watched of them a while ago, I don't remember which, they basically said, well, no, that this was Miss Hania Austin. She put it precisely this way, and it was like she put it better than we could have articulated. And
Yeah.
that something really did stem from her in terms of all of that and what's going on with this character. And I think she does really represent in a personalized way the relationship between Whitney in particular and kind of the indigenous culture.
Yeah.
And
You know, this, I may be completely off base here, and this just came to me. It seems like Cara, there were other, the guy you were talking about that was given the security job and decides, well, the right thing to do because of the area we live in is to bring the shotgun to the stores. Nobody shoplifts.
mhm.
It's funny, maybe it's just because they did such a good job with the setting and sort of this aesthetic that we talked about. It almost seems like Whitney and Asher and Dougie, those people are acting in a story. Everybody else is just sort of being very authentic in terms of to what this place in New Mexico actually is, what their story, what their history is there. And it's just like this alien force just descended on it. And Whitney and Asher Dougie just don't belong. I don't know. I just was compelled by the stuff with Cara Duran, with the other natives of that city, because it was so interesting to me. It was so foreign to me and unique to me. And it seems like you guys should not be here. You don't at all belong in this area because it's so rich in some of all these other things. I don't know. It just seems like, and maybe that was the point, that they just felt like, I mean, real aliens coming and landing and somewhere that they don't belong. This area need them there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's something to that, in the parallel with, I don't know, the history of colonialism, the history of the United States,
Yeah.
and I don't have a worked out line on that. I'm not sure the show does either. That's part of what I find so interesting about it. It's like kind of playing with all this stuff, and it definitely
Yeah.
challenges us to think about various things, but I don't know that it takes as simple a line as what you were saying. Right? Like I think what you're
Yeah.
saying is interesting and that's there, but there's more nuance to it. There's more complexity or what
That's
have
more
you.
Yeah, that's one of the unique things about the show is you can't sit down and pinpoint a theme or a message or this is the point we wanted to get across with this show. It's incredibly diverse in sort of what it's trying to approach. It's incredibly diverse in terms of what it's trying to say. Sort of left to our own devices as to how we interpret all these different themes and messages that are brought up.
Yeah, right. And so with Kara, Whitney, it's like, are they friends? From Whitney's perspective, she thinks Kara is her friend. From Kara's perspective, Whitney's never her friend, and she knows Whitney's not her friend. And then Whitney wants to use Kara's art in the houses, and there's the whole thing about that. And then finally, Kara decides to sign on as a consultant and take some of this white woman's money, And there's that whole question, I think, that she is grappling with of whether she's selling out, as it were, or whether she is managing to just take the benefit of this possibility and almost exploiting Whitney. Which direction is the exploitation going? But then I think when you get that scene when they're at the party and Whitney kind of forces her on camera to praise Whitney's quote unquote art or houses or whatever, you can just, man, that scene, and her face in that scene, and you can just sort of see everything in that moment of her realizing that she is the one that is being exploited in this relationship.
Yeah. That was in a season of a lot of powerful and emotional scenes, and maybe one of the most, because of how it made you confront their relationship and also Kara's understanding of, do I quote unquote sell out for the sake of my art or the sake of my future, the sake of what I want to do, just to try to please this woman that thinks we have something that we don't actually have. I thought that was one of the best scenes of the season.
Agreed. Yeah. And then the complication, though, again, it's messy always, because Kara, I don't think she's in the show again after that, actually, but she's mentioned, and Whitney's upset because Kara has quit art. She's quit being an artist, but now she's got this profile. I think it was in the New York Times. It was something like that. Whitney's upset about how she's getting all this attention for quitting art and so on. Well, but she is getting all of that attention, right? So if you could understand Kara saying, well, I'm going to take a step back from all of this because of those worries about exploitation and so on and so forth, or selling out, or I feel like I have sold out. But then she's being featured in a profile and so on. She hasn't gotten out of that whole kind of nexus of a certain kind of fame or what have you that Whitney's jealous of. So
that's I think a key point. That she's getting a profile for something that she quit doing. For something that when Whitney was trying desperately to get involved in what she was doing, now she's getting the notoriety, the fame that Whitney wants because she quit doing it.
Whitney's upset.
Quite the irony. I mean, and very interesting.
Yeah, and Whitney's upset too because their show is only on HGTV Plus streaming or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
But we need to talk about the ending more.
Yeah, we should.
It's interesting to me that we've kind of held off as long as we have, and how I feel like there was a lot of stuff going on with regard to everything we've been talking about that could have just continued.
Yeah.
But that's not what we get. Instead, we get one morning, Whitney wakes up, Nasher's on the ceiling.
Yeah.
Now, apparently, we were talking about them filming before, and I did want to mention this. I was reading that they filmed all of that, right? They're like, I don't know exactly how they did it. This is all practical.
No CG. Yeah.
They've got like an upside down set or whatever, Nathan Fielder, and really set themselves a challenge also, because they're like, well, you know what, too, we're gonna have long shots. So they had to do a lot of planning and like make sure things are in the right places and all of that kind of stuff. But I don't know. Let's talk about it more thematically. How did this ending strike you, Ryan?
Yeah, and I think it's also important to set the context of, we see the ending after there has been a show that's been created. They're disappointed it's on HGTV streaming. But there's a show that's been created. It's called Green Queen,
No
which is
longer
not,
philanthropy.
yeah, not originally what they wanted. So it focuses more on Whitney and her, sometimes doofus husband who, we just sort of, she can talk about how incompetent he is. They also are pregnant, which leads to a whole, another discussion about some things that are brought up earlier in the show about their sexual life. So all those things seem to have been resolved, at least in terms of the things they wanted, the things that they were hoping for. And then we get this just wild off the wall, I mean, literally off the, Asher's bouncing off the wall ending where it seems like, okay, things seem to have normalized or we've gotten what we want. And then this, whether it's a curse, whether it's it's just, you can't have the things that you want to have, that type of message. We get this wild ending with Asher floating in the room and eventually up into space.
Yeah. Well, we almost do have to talk about their relationship more than we have, I guess,
Yeah.
to grapple with the ending, because we didn't really so far get into all of that in terms of at one point, Whitney and Dougie are kind of making a version of it that's very anti-Asher, and Whitney's thinking about leaving Asher in real
Yeah.
life,
Right.
but of course that'd be a problem for their ongoing show. So to what extent does she decide to stay with Asher for the sake of being able to continue to do the show?
Right.
You have that scene where she makes him watch the footage, or he insists on seeing the footage, something like that.
Yeah.
And Nathan Fielder's character, Asher, in that scene, which is in the penultimate episode, I think, at the
Yeah.
end. I think
Yes, I
that's
believe
right.
that's right. Yeah.
But he is saying, "Oh, I know I messed up or whatever." Like he's saying, "I'll be whatever you want me to be," or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I found that scene to be difficult watch, and like really got thinking about emotional manipulation and structures like that. But I think that feeds into the ending in a certain way because
Yeah, that happened, and then they sort of got what they wanted in a way, or at least Whitney got what she wanted in a way. After that, just incredibly, again, like as you said, manipulating and emotionally devastating sort of not resolution they come to, but confrontation that they have. But that leads to this, we think that we're safe, we think that we're where we want to be. Not now things are literally out of this world.
yeah. So I mean, to what extent is it something like Asher insubordinating himself to Whitney? Um, how much of that is at play? I guess I still don't have a definitive line on this. When I wrote on it at the time, I think I did a pretty good job. I don't know if people can read my article and tell me what they think, but I felt a step short of the kind of interpretation I wanted to be able to get out of myself. And I still, I guess, am feeling that to some degree. But thematically, I feel like it weirdly works
Yeah,
that
yeah,
this weird thing happens in this context where you have that backstory of their relationship. He's really subordinated himself to her. She's pregnant. We talked earlier about them being kind of detached from reality or what have you. And in a way, it's almost made literal, right?
yeah,
He's no longer grounded, literally, right?
yeah.
Um,
So many ways you can take that. I mean, I read it maybe too simply as, there's clearly the parallel of this happening to Asher as Whitney is giving birth to their son. And Asher can simply, maybe because he was cursed, maybe because of who he has been or who he and Whitney have been and what they have done, simply cannot have these things that would make them happy, would make them successful, would make them feel like that they have accomplished what they want to accomplish. So he is going to become detached from those things as, Whitney, who sort of became the dominant force, the one that he was, as you said, self-subordinate to, or subordinate to. She becomes the one who is able to have them. Asher is not, for a variety of reasons. Again, because of curse, because of behavior, because of actions, because of limitations. I've tried to sort of square the circle of the ending and what it actually means. There's so many different directions you can go, but he is being replaced by the newer version of himself as Whitney has the baby, and cannot simply stay in a place that has that much goodness or happiness. He's not letting himself be that person, and that's what happened in the episode before.
Interesting. Yeah. So to some degree, it's that he's becoming irrelevant to the story, to the situation, to the setup of the Green Queen.
He became irrelevant
already switched with the title change.
Show. Yeah, he became irrelevant to their relationship after they got pregnant. He became, irrelevant. Dougie took more of a control of what it was and what it was to become than Asher ever did. When Asher thought he was the one in control, could make himself self-important by giving Abshir the property, by doing all these things. None of that seems to matter. And giving him the property, he gave him all the problems, right? It's just sort of, he can't make himself relevant no matter how hard he tries.
Yeah. When that scene too was striking. I mean, there's so much stuff that we're just not going to have time to talk about.
Yeah.
But that Asher gives Abshir the property, and Abshir's like, "Whoa, what about the taxes and all this stuff?" And he's like, "What's it?" He does, and there's this moment where you can tell that Asher and Whitney do not feel like Abshir has been sufficiently grateful,
right?
But then it goes unexpressed. It's just going to be swallowed, maybe by Asher in particular, as something that he's not going to express that that real sentiment. Does he ever have the time to go and file that paperwork he says he's going to do? Does he do that? Would be a question, I suppose.
Yeah.
Oddly, we haven't even really talked about the name of the show. In your summary, you mentioned how Abshir's daughter cursed him. Apparently, that stemmed from a real life story when Nathan Fielder moved to the States, and some woman on the streets of LA asked him for money, and he said he didn't have any, and she said, "I curse you." And it stuck in his mind, you know, and so he ended up going to an ATM and going back and giving her some money.
I do love just that we spent the rest of that show for psychoanalyzing. Is this curse real, or is it in his mind and he's then in turn making it real? I mean, I just thought that was a way to line up some of the things that were happening that was able to be consistent through, I guess, even the last 9 episodes.
Yeah. And I mean, I think overall there aren't really indications. Well, I guess there are some indications that it was real, right? Because her curse was for no chicken in his spaghetti. And
all right.
Her chicken was missing, But there's a second curse. Dougie curses him. And I don't know if we should be reading into that. Dougie's a fascinating character in various ways with Penny Safdie's character, right? Lots of stuff we probably just won't make the time to talk about here. But in that final scene, Dougie arrives. Dougie thinks Asher's just like climbed a tree because he's afraid of becoming a father and things like that. The fire department shows up. No one will believe Asher.
Right.
And, as you mentioned, he ends up because they like set up stuff on the ground for when he'll fall. But when they like cut the tree branch up into outer space, and then Dougie just like breaks down crying sitting on the pavement. Any thoughts on that?
I wonder about why they included that, particularly because they included it right next to the very, very ending, which is sort of bystanders saying, "Oh, look at that, must have been a publicity stunt or something they just did for TV or whatever." And so it's like, is Dougie finally realizing that his mission of doing everything to make the perfect the perfect show is, took it too far? Is he, I didn't quite understand why that, other than either there's really the sympathetic, emotional part of I lost my friend, or I've lost the thing that makes me that makes me money. I think it's the former. But sort of why it's, why they would go that specific direction paired with what the people say at the end. I'm not quite sure I have a read on what was that supposed to be.
Yeah. I mean, I have some thoughts on it. I guess first thing I want to point out is it's clear they thought this was really important. Because I also read some stuff about this. Apparently, um, Nathan Fielder, who was directing the episode, just gave Penny Safdie all the time he needed.
Yeah.
Just like, let me know when you're ready to do it.
Yeah.
20 minutes pass, half hour, and when it was okay, now we're ready to do the shot. You're really breaking down crying. And it is emotionally powerful.
Yeah.
Why is he crying? To some extent, I think it's because he didn't believe Asher,
Yeah.
but now he's seen him float up in his face. I do wonder if he's thinking to himself about that night in the car when he said, "I curse you," after Asher got out of the car.
Yeah.
How superstitious is Dougie here? I don't know. I guess I did read it as more having to do with their relationship, pseudo friendship.
Yeah. I think as he's finally evolved into realizing that's what they have and feeling that emotion, in the end, the outside world, which is what he always wanted to appeal to, still sees it as, oh, cool thing they did for TV.
Right. So the neighbors or whatever. Now apparently the possibility of a season 2 is not off the table.
I was going to say, I would have two things to say to you. Yeah, Safdie has said specifically it's not off the table. Fielder has said there definitely could be another season. So, do you think there should be? Do you think there will be? What's your thoughts there?
I mean, I think it'd be really interesting, and I would definitely watch it.
Yeah.
What I saw where Penny Safdie was saying something about not being off the table was also that the kind of inaugural idea for it would have to do with what exactly did happen to Asher and how
Mhm.
you interpret it. But I don't know. I'd be hesitant to put too much weight on that because of something we said along the way here, which is from a certain point of view, you could almost read it as Asher becomes irrelevant
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
the show, to the green queen, and then maybe also to the curse. So they could well make, because that was the first thing I thought when I watched the finale, is I thought, oh well, I don't know if there's going to be more of the show, because I mean clearly Nathan Fielder can't be in it anymore,
Right.
but maybe they could do it without Nathan Fielder. I
Yeah.
mean, in front of the camera, he'd probably still be behind the camera.
How Dougie and Whitney go forward with Green Queen because they could do that with or without Asher anyways, something like that.
Right, because it's no longer this couple, it's
Yeah.
centered on her as the green queen. Um, maybe playing with that background, quote unquote, tragedy or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever happened to Asher, but now it's Whitney and her um, kid. She looks weirdly happy in the final shot.
Yeah. Now remind me, does she know what happened to Asher?
No,
She
not
doesn't.
yet.
Yeah.
But here's what she does. Well, I mean, so he had ended up in the tree when
Hmm.
she goes to the hospital, right?
Yeah.
So to my memory, she doesn't know that he's like flown up into outer
Right.
space and died.
Right.
Um, but that whole scene's funny too, because he keeps saying, "I'll be right behind you." It's like they're gonna figure this out soon somehow.
Yeah.
Like, but she's just seemed really unconcerned
Yeah.
throughout, you know, of the fact that he hasn't shown up at the hospital. She just doesn't seem particularly concerned about what has happened with Asher, who last I knew was, hanging on to a tree branch or what have you. And I think right before that last shot, the nurse asks her um, something like, "Do you want me to see if your husband's here?" And she says, "Yeah," or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But again, she doesn't seem very concerned about any of it. And
She, as she did the whole season, was probably still assuming there's some rational, logical, we can figure this out way to explain what was happening to them, and they'll just, they'll get through it. Whatever they want to do will end up working out. And I think that's kind of the theme of what they thought through this entire first season.
Yeah, or she doesn't really care. I don't know. Maybe he has
Or she doesn't care
been
about it.
irrelevant. So I don't know. I'll be
Yeah.
very curious to see if they do make more of this
Yeah.
series and what they would do with it. Again, presumably, I can't put anything past him.
No.
It seems like Asher could not be in season 2, but hey, you could just put him in there again, whatever,
Yeah.
and but they probably won't. I think they take seriously this event that happens to Asher and then play with it. And certainly, I think.
So just 2 months ago, Fielder told Hollywood Reporter, from the start, we had it mapped out beyond the first season. So
There you go.
yeah.
It's going to happen.
I
I think this has been pretty acclaimed.
Yeah, absolutely it was. I mean, talk about being a part of the cultural conversation. This show was it, despite the fact of being on the seventh most popular streamer out there. I don't know, but it just was
Yeah.
there was a lot of signal around the show.
It's already been nominated for some awards. I think it will be nominated for more and not win anything.
Yeah, that's probably right.
I think that's the fate of this show. It'll be on all the nomination lists and probably not win on anything because it's always up against The Bear or whatever. Although it should be in the comedy category. That's the Curse should be in the comedy category.
So I had that in my notes to ask you. The Curse was nominated for Golden Globe, Spirit Award, Writers Guild of America Award, all in drama.
Yeah.
Should it have been in another category? Which it would go up against The Bear, which is also and lose. So it's not like it matters, but
right. You're right. It's not losing to The Bear because The Bear they've got in comedy and The Curse they've got in drama. So The Curse instead loses to Succession or Shogun or however these things work out exactly. In terms of the timing. I do think, genre is always tough to talk about and pin down, and I think that's part of the problem. The best shows probably are the ones where it's the fuzziest about what genre to put them in many instances, at least.
Yeah. I'm hoping in a couple weeks' time, you may have seen this, I didn't put it on purpose. There was a Variety piece that came out this week saying, The Bear addresses issues like suicide, emotional maturity, crisis, all these different things. Is it actually a comedy, or why is it in comedy? It got a lot of publicity and a lot of people talking about it because of this whole debate. Hopefully in a couple of weeks we can talk about that piece and sort of our thoughts on that. But there is sort of this thing of, as these new pieces of TV content are being created, how are we going to choose to define them in these boxes that they touch so many points? They don't fit clearly in these things anymore, which is part of what makes them so good.
Yeah. I think you can ask though, like, what is the prevailing spirit? Where does the point land or something like that? This is what I would do at least. And with that question in my own mind, I would say, okay, well, the point of The Curse is that it's funny. Like the point of this show is primarily in comedy. Where I do think with The Bear, it's in drama. There are funny moments in The Bear, but I think that the prevailing spirit is more dramatic, more emotionally serious. Barry, the point's to be funny, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's very dark. So it's like, I don't know. I have my way of thinking about these things. I do feel like when it comes to award categories, that they're often just like, oh, half-hour comedy, hour drama.
Exactly.
I don't know that that's always fair. But
to that point, Barry, The Bear, The Curse, 3 of the best shows the past 2 years. So, can't Can't put those shows in a box, my friend.
I should note there though too, Ryan, and I know we've griped about this multiple times, but it is actually my understanding, because things like the Emmys are so weird in various ways, that you submit in a category. So
Yeah,
it's probably I think this is how it works. So it's not that, the awards association is saying The Bear is a comedy.
yeah.
It's that FX submitted it as a comedy. So
They had to
put the blame on the right people, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. But it still goes back to the fact that only those categories exist. That goes back to the work. So anyway, we can talk in circles about that.
And how much politicking do they do? I saw someone who was saying something about this, like about oh man, I can't remember all the details, but he was playing with this as well. I'm like, I think it was on Blue Sky on social media, where he was saying, this will be submitted in that category, so it doesn't have to go up against that. And Fargo, it will be submitted, whatever. I'm just rambling. I don't even remember the details of it.
Well, I'm very glad to revisit this show. This was a good conversation, and I'm glad we finally got to talk about it at length, which is something we didn't get to do on the podcast when it was first going.
Yeah, me too. Enjoyed talking about it with you. Yeah. There's so much here that we still weren't able to get into, but fans of the curse, you can go and read my articles on TV Obsessive. I wrote on it week to week as it was airing. This is one of those. There's a handful of shows where I always find myself thinking, I should return to this with like a more comprehensive essay or something. And do I find the time to do that?
Yeah.
Rarely. I did it with Severance. So it's hard to find time. Anyhow, thanks for listening. Next week, we're going with Ryan's choice. Yeah. Tell people what you've chosen.
So next week, we're going to talk about the first season of Three Body Problem, which I'm going to say you should not watch. We should have a conversation with you not watching it. I may pick one episode or so to try to get you some context for some things, but I'd love to have a conversation on some of the themes and things they touch on, and how grand they try to be with this show without you having the context of having seen it. Watch it if you want, but just either way, it's going to be an interesting conversation.
Now I'm really waffling. I saw that you chose the show, and I thought, well, I haven't made time to watch this show yet, but I could probably do it within the next week. It's just binge one season of a show, but now you're telling me not to watch it. We'll see how it goes, everyone. Tune in next week to find out whether I watched the show before we talk about it.
Yeah, if you're not watched it yet, it's one season, Three Body Problem on Netflix.
Either way, we'll get into spoiler territory.
Either way,
right? So
you read all my stuff, so
yeah, right. So people listening, next week we'll talk about Three Body Problem with our usual news and notes up front, and then after next week, I think we're gonna start talking about the Bear for a couple weeks. So thanks for listening. As always, if you enjoyed the podcast, please do leave a good rating, review, or if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the thumbs up button, all that good stuff. Check out TVObscessive.com. Follow us on social media, search for TV Obsessive, and you should find us on whatever platform you're using, unless it's something really weird. There's so many social media platforms now. Anyway, we're on X, we're on Facebook, we're on Blue Sky, we're on Threads, we're on Instagram. And that's about it. So we'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks for the conversation. See you then.